4 days before Christmas, my daughter called and spoke 8 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about being a father. "Dad, don't come. Michael says it's too complicated." I stood in my kitchen in Denver, Colorado, holding the phone, watching snow fall outside my window, and felt my heart crack down the middle. I was 62 years old. I had spent 37 years raising that girl, walking her to school, teaching her to drive, paying for her college, dancing at her wedding, and now her husband had decided I was too complicated for their Christmas dinner. So I spent Christmas Eve alone at a steakhouse downtown, surrounded by families celebrating together, trying to swallow food that tasted like cardboard. Halfway through my meal, a man about my age walked over to my table and asked if I wanted to join him and his wife. I said yes, thinking it was just holiday kindness from a stranger. I had no idea that simple word would completely transform my life. 7 years later, my daughter stood in my living room, tears streaming down her face, and only then did I truly understand what that invitation had set in motion. Thank you for being here and taking the time to listen. Please leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to connect with you. Also, a quick note. This story includes some fictional elements added for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely coincidental, but the message is absolutely true. My name is Robert Chen, and I had just turned 62 that winter. I'm 69 now, telling you this with 7 years of clarity I didn't have back then. I spent most of my adult life believing I was a good father. I worked hard, provided well, showed up to every recital and graduation. I thought that was enough. I thought love was demonstrated through responsibility and sacrifice. But sitting alone in that steakhouse on Christmas Eve, I learned something painful. Sometimes being a good provider doesn't mean anything if the people you provided for don't actually want you around. The restaurant was called the Rustic Table, one of those upscale places that stays open on holidays for people who have nowhere else to go. The hostess had given me a sympathetic look when I walked in alone. She seated me near the window, away from the families, like she understood I didn't need to watch other people's happiness up close. I ordered a ribeye and a glass of red wine. The steak was probably excellent. I couldn't taste it. All I could think about was my daughter's voice on the phone 4 days earlier, the way she'd lowered it like she was afraid Michael might hear her being too kind to me. "Dad, don't come. Michael says it's too complicated." I had asked what that meant. Complicated how? We had done Christmas together for the past 5 years since she got married. I had never caused problems. I brought gifts, helped with dishes, played with my grandson. I thought things were fine. It's just, with his parents coming this year, and the house being small, and everything that happened at Thanksgiving. What happened at Thanksgiving was that I had quietly disagreed with Michael about politics at the dinner table. Not loudly, not rudely. I had simply said I saw things differently and changed the subject. Michael had been cold to me the rest of the evening, and my daughter had apologized to him 3 times that I heard, probably more times that I didn't. "Sarah," I had said carefully, "I'm your father. I haven't seen you since October. I just want to spend Christmas with my family." The pause on the line had been long enough for me to hear Michael's voice in the background, impatient, asking who she was talking to. "I'm sorry, Dad. Maybe next year. Maybe next year." Like I was a magazine subscription she was thinking about renewing. So there I was, on Christmas Eve, 62 years old, divorced for 15 years, sitting alone in a restaurant full of strangers, wondering how I had ended up so completely unnecessary to the people I had built my life around. That's when Harold Gibson walked up to my table. He was a tall black man with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing a cardigan that looked hand-knitted. His wife Margaret stood a few feet behind him, small and elegant, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Excuse me," Harold said. "I couldn't help noticing you're alone tonight. My wife and I have a table for 4, but it's just the 2 of us. Would you like to join us?" I almost said no. Every instinct told me to protect my privacy, to handle my loneliness the way men of my generation were taught to handle it. Quietly, invisibly, without burdening anyone. But something in Harold's face stopped me. There was no pity there, just simple human recognition. one lonely person reaching out to another. "I don't want to intrude on your evening," I said. "You wouldn't be intruding," Margaret said, stepping forward. Her voice was warm, southern, like honey over gravel. "We genuinely enjoy the company. Our children are scattered all over the country this year. It's just us, and too much food." I looked at my half-eaten steak, at the empty chairs around me, at the families laughing and talking at every other table, and I made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," I said. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." That first dinner with Harold and Margaret Gibson lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything. Harold had been a high school principal for 30 years before retiring. Margaret had been a nurse, then a nursing instructor. They had 3 adult children and 7 grandchildren, spread across California, Georgia, and Maine. "Holidays used to be chaos," Margaret said, laughing. "Now they're quiet. We're still figuring out what quiet looks like." I told them about Sarah, about Michael, about the phone call 4 days ago. I hadn't planned to share so much with strangers, but something about their presence made honesty feel safe. "That's hard," Harold said simply. He didn't offer advice or try to fix anything. He just acknowledged the pain, and somehow that was exactly what I needed. When the check came, Harold insisted on paying for my meal despite my protests. "Consider it a Christmas gift," he said. "And Robert, if you're not doing anything next Sunday, Margaret makes the best pot roast in Denver. We'd love to have you over." I almost said no again. I almost retreated back into my careful, protected solitude. But Margaret was already writing their address on a napkin, and Harold was shaking my hand like we had known each other for years instead of hours. 6 o'clock, Margaret said. "Don't bring anything except yourself." I took the napkin. I put it in my wallet, and I drove home through the snowy Denver streets, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That first Sunday dinner at the Gibson house was the beginning of everything. Their home was a 2-story craftsman in Park Hill, filled with books and photographs and the smell of something delicious cooking. Harold met me at the door and immediately put me to work, helping him set the table. "Margaret has very specific ideas about how the table should look," he whispered conspiratorially. "I've been married to her for 43 years, and I still get it wrong sometimes." Margaret appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "I heard that, Harold Gibson, and you do not get it wrong. You just get it different." She winked at me. "Welcome, Robert. Make yourself at home." That evening, I met their youngest son, David, who lived in Denver with his wife, Lisa, and their 2 children. The grandchildren, Emma, who was 8, and Marcus, who was 5, immediately adopted me as a new audience for their stories and drawings. By the time dinner was served, I had learned about Emma's obsession with dinosaurs and Marcus's firm belief that he would one day be an astronaut and a firefighter at the same time. "Don't try to talk him out of it," David said, grinning. "He's already designed the spacesuit with a fire hose attachment." The pot roast was exactly as good as Harold had promised. But what I remember most about that dinner wasn't the food. It was the way everyone talked over each other with affection rather than irritation. The way Harold reached for Margaret's hand during quiet moments. The way David and Lisa worked as a team, clearing dishes without anyone having to ask. The way the children were included in conversations instead of shushed. This was what family was supposed to look like. This was what I had always wanted with Sarah. When I left that night, Margaret hugged me at the door and said something that stayed with me for years. "Same time next Sunday, Robert. And every Sunday after that if you want." I wanted. 3 months passed. Then 6. Then a year. The Sunday dinners at the Gibson house became the fixed point around which my life rotated. I started arriving early to help Harold with small repairs around the house. I taught Marcus how to play chess. I helped Emma with her science fair project on volcanic eruptions. Margaret insisted I had a magic touch with her garden, though I suspected she was just being kind. I didn't hear from Sarah during that first year. Not on my birthday, not on Father's Day, not on Christmas. I sent cards and gifts for my grandson Ethan's birthday and received a brief thank you text in return. I called twice. Both times Sarah was too busy to talk and promised to call back. She never did. The silence hurt. It hurt every single day. But the pain was different now because it existed alongside something else. Belonging. Community. The Gibson family wasn't replacing my daughter. Nothing could do that. But they were teaching me something crucial. I could be loved without earning it. I could matter to people who had no obligation to care about me. One Sunday evening, about 14 months after that first Christmas Eve, I arrived at the Gibson house to find Margaret alone in the kitchen, crying softly while she stirred a pot of soup. "Margaret?" I said. "What's wrong?" She looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her eyes. "Oh, Robert. I didn't hear you come in. It's nothing. I'm just being foolish." "It's not nothing if it's making you cry." She hesitated. Then she set down her spoon and leaned against the counter, looking suddenly older than her 68 years. "My sister passed away this morning. We hadn't spoken in 11 years. The story came out slowly. Margaret and her younger sister Dorothy had a falling out over their mother's estate after she died. Harsh words were exchanged. Accusations. Eventually, silence. Margaret had reached out several times over the years, but Dorothy never responded. "And now it's too late," Margaret said. "She's gone. And all I can think about is everything I should have said. Everything I should have done differently." I stood there in that warm kitchen, watching this kind woman grieve not just her sister, but the relationship they had let wither. And I felt something shift in my chest. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. Don't let it happen to you, Robert." She looked at me directly, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "Whatever is between you and your daughter, don't let it stay broken until it's too late. Pride isn't worth it. Being right isn't worth it. Time runs out, and then all you have are regrets." I thought about that conversation for weeks. I thought about it when I drove past the card store and almost went in to buy something for Sarah. I thought about it when Ethan's birthday came around and I sent a gift that was never acknowledged. I thought about it when Father's Day passed without a word, but I didn't reach out. The rejection still felt too fresh. The fear of being told again that I was too complicated kept me paralyzed. Then, 2 years after that first Christmas Eve, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Sarah. "Dad?" Her voice sounded strange, thin, not like the confident woman I remembered. "Can we talk?" I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "Of course. I'm here. Michael and I are having some problems." The words came out rushed, like she had been practicing them. "Financial problems. The business isn't doing well, and we got behind on some payments. And now there's this debt that we need to clear before the bank. Before they." She trailed off. I waited, my heart pounding, hoping for something. An apology, an acknowledgement, some recognition that she had hurt me and wanted to make it right. "Dad, I need $60,000. I know it's a lot, but you have the retirement fund, and Michael says if we can just get through this quarter, everything will stabilize." "Michael says." "Sarah," I said slowly. "When did we last speak? Before today?" Silence on the line. "I'm trying to remember," I continued. "Was it the Christmas you disinvited me?" "No, wait. You texted me in January after that. 'Happy New Year.' 3 words. Was that it? 2 years of nothing. And now you're calling to ask for $60,000? That's not fair." Her voice sharpened. "You know things have been complicated with Michael and his family. You know he has opinions about me," I finished. "Yes, I know. I'm too complicated, too different, too something. I've been whatever he needed me to be for 2 years, Sarah. I've been invisible, and now suddenly you need money, and I exist again. I'm your daughter." She was crying now. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" The question hit like a physical blow, because of course it meant something. It meant everything. She was my daughter, my only child, the person I had loved most in the world for 39 years. But she was also the person who had chosen her husband's comfort over her father's presence, who had let 2 years pass without a real conversation, who was calling now not because she missed me, but because she needed something from me. "Sarah, I love you. I have always loved you, but I can't give you $60,000. "Why not?" "You have it. I know you do. Because giving you that money won't fix what's actually broken. Because Michael will find another crisis next year, and another one after that. And I'll become the person who solves his problems with my retirement fund until there's nothing left. Because you haven't asked me how I am in 2 years, and you're not asking now. So you're choosing money over your own daughter. Her voice was hard now, accusatory. That's who you are? That's the kind of father you've become? No, I said, and my voice was steady despite the trembling in my hands. I'm the kind of father who learned that love isn't the same as being used. I'm the kind of father who has people in his life now who show up for Sunday dinner not because they need something, but because they want to be there. I'm choosing that. Sarah, I'm choosing to be valued, not just needed. There was a long pause. Then Sarah spoke, and her words were cold and precise. You know what, Dad? Michael was right about you. He always said you were selfish underneath all that nice guy exterior. I defended you for years. I won't make that mistake again. Don't call me. Don't text me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice. The line went dead. I stood in my apartment, the phone still in my hand, and waited for the devastation to hit. It did, eventually. But mixed with the grief was something unexpected. Relief. I had finally stopped pretending. I had finally told the truth. And my daughter had shown me exactly who she had become. Or maybe who she had always been, and I had refused to see. That evening, I drove to the Gibson house, even though it wasn't Sunday. Harold answered the door and took one look at my face. Come in, Robert. Margaret's making tea. I told them everything. Sarah's call, the money, the ultimatum, the cold click of disconnection. They listened without interrupting, the way they always did. And when I finished, Margaret took my hand. You did the right thing, she said firmly. Boundaries aren't abandonment. Remember that. It doesn't feel like the right thing. It feels like I just lost my daughter. You didn't lose her today, Harold said gently. You lost her a long time ago, piece by piece. Today you just finally let yourself see it. He was right. I had been losing Sarah for years, maybe decades. Every time I let Michael's coldness slide. Every time I accepted being excluded or minimized. Every time I told myself that things would get better if I just tried harder, loved more, expected less. I had been slowly erasing myself to make room for her life, and she had let me disappear without ever asking me to stay. What do I do now? I asked. You keep living, Margaret said. You keep showing up on Sundays. You let us love you, and you trust that everything else will work out the way it's supposed to. 5 years passed. 5 years without a word from Sarah. No birthday cards, no holiday calls, no photos of Ethan, who was growing up without knowing his grandfather. I learned about her life the way strangers learn about each other, through occasional updates from mutual acquaintances, through social media posts I sometimes saw before reminding myself not to look. She and Michael had apparently worked through their financial troubles, though I never learned how. They moved to a bigger house in the suburbs. Ethan started middle school. Life went on, with me carefully edited out of the picture. But my life went on too. I retired from my engineering job and started volunteering at a local community center, teaching basic computer skills to seniors. I became an unofficial member of the Gibson family, present for every birthday, every holiday, every Sunday dinner without fail. Emma started high school and still asked for my help with science projects. Marcus discovered he loved cooking and started helping his grandmother in the kitchen. The two of them inventing increasingly elaborate dishes, while Harold and I pretended to be terrified of the results. I was happy, not the desperate, grateful happiness of someone who had finally escaped loneliness, but the quiet, settled happiness of someone who had found where he belonged. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was a Thursday morning in March. I was at the community center, helping a 74-year-old woman named Dorothy figure out how to video chat with her grandchildren when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Robert Chen? The voice was male, professional. Yes, this is Robert. This is Dr. Williams at St. Mary's Hospital. Your daughter Sarah Chen Mitchell is here. She listed you as her emergency contact. There's been an accident. The drive to the hospital took 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours. I called Harold from the car. He said he and Margaret would meet me there. I told him he didn't have to do that. He said, "Robert, don't be ridiculous. We're coming." Sarah was in the ICU when I arrived. A car accident, they told me. A drunk driver running a red light. She was stable but had significant injuries, including a broken pelvis, fractured ribs, and internal bleeding that required surgery. Michael was with her, but he had stepped out when I arrived, and we passed each other in the hallway without speaking. Ethan was there too, sitting in the waiting room with red-rimmed eyes. He was 12 now, tall and thin, and he looked at me like he was trying to place a face he almost remembered. "Grandpa?" he said hesitantly. "Hey, buddy." I sat down next to him, keeping a careful distance. "I'm here. Mom talked about you sometimes." He was fidgeting with his phone, not meeting my eyes. "She said you were busy. That's why you didn't visit." I opened my mouth to correct him, then stopped. What would be the point? He was 12 years old and his mother was in the ICU. He didn't need me to explain how I had been carefully excluded from his life. He just needed someone to be there. "I'm not busy anymore," I said. "I'm right here." Harold and Margaret arrived 20 minutes later. Margaret immediately took charge, finding better chairs, locating the cafeteria, making sure Ethan had something to eat. Harold sat with me in the waiting room. Not saying much, just present. "You didn't have to come," I said again. "Robert." Harold put a hand on my shoulder. "When are you going to understand? This is what family does. The family you choose shows up, especially when things are hard." The next few weeks were a blur. Sarah's recovery was slow and complicated. Michael, it turned out, had to travel for work and couldn't take time off. His parents lived in Florida and were too old to help. So the task of caring for Sarah during her recovery fell to me, the father she had cut out of her life 7 years ago. I moved into their guest room. I helped Sarah to and from physical therapy appointments. I made meals, cleaned the house, drove Ethan to school and soccer practice. I did everything a father does. Everything I had always wanted to do. While Sarah watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. 3 weeks into my stay, late at night, Sarah called my name from her room. "Dad, can you come here?" I found her sitting up in bed, her face pale in the light from the hallway. She had been crying. "I can't sleep," she said. "I keep replaying the accident. The sound of the impact. I thought I was going to die, Dad. I really thought that was it." I sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair I had sat in every night to make sure she was okay before I went to sleep myself. "You're safe now," I said. "You're going to be fine. That's not." She took a shaky breath. "When I was in the ambulance, when I thought I might die, do you know what I thought about?" I shook my head. "I thought about you. About the last thing I said to you. Don't call me. As far as I'm concerned, you've made your choice. 7 years ago, Dad, those were going to be my last words to my father." She was crying harder now, and I didn't know what to do. I had imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, all my prepared responses evaporated. "I was so wrong," Sarah whispered. "About everything. Michael told me you were selfish, that you only cared about money, that you were trying to control me. And I believed him because it was easier than admitting that I had pushed you away, that I had let him push you away, that I was too weak to stand up for you when it mattered." "Sarah, no. Let me finish. Please." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "These past 3 weeks, you've been here every day, every single day. Michael has called maybe 4 times. His parents sent flowers. And you, the father I told to get out of my life, you moved into my house and took care of me and my son without a single complaint, without asking for anything, without making me feel guilty. You're my daughter," I said simply. "That's what fathers do." "No." She shook her head fiercely. "That's what good fathers do. That's what you do." And I threw it away. I threw you away. For a man who can't even be bothered to come home when his wife almost dies. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood. Normal life, going on as usual. while something enormous shifted between us. "I want to meet them," Sarah said finally. "Who?" "The people who have been your family while I was too stupid to see what I had. Harold and Margaret. You talk about them sometimes when you think I'm asleep. You call them every evening. They're the ones who were there for you when I wasn't." I felt my throat tighten. "You'd want to do that?" "I'd want to thank them," Sarah said, "for taking care of my father, for being what I should have been." The first Sunday dinner that Sarah attended was 2 months later, after she had recovered enough to travel. I drove her to the Gibson house, with my heart pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. What if the Gibsons didn't accept her? What if they resented her for how she had treated me? What if the two halves of my life couldn't fit together? I shouldn't have worried. Margaret answered the door, took one look at Sarah standing nervously behind me, and opened her arms. "You must be Sarah," she said. "I'm so glad you're finally here. Come in. Come in. I made your father's favorite lasagna." The evening was awkward at first. Sarah was quiet, intimidated by this warm, welcoming family that had given her father everything she had denied him. But Emma, now 16 and fearlessly outspoken, broke the ice by asking Sarah about her job as a graphic designer. Marcus, 14 and obsessed with art, immediately wanted to see her portfolio. By the time dinner was served, Sarah was laughing at Harold's terrible jokes and helping Margaret in the kitchen. At the end of the evening, as we were saying goodbye, Sarah pulled Margaret aside. I watched them talk for a few minutes, saw Sarah wipe her eyes, saw Margaret hug her tightly. On the drive home, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I understand now." "Understand what?" "Why you chose them. Why you kept going back every Sunday. They don't need anything from you, Dad. They just want you there. That's not something I knew how to give you, but I want to learn." I didn't say anything. I just reached over and squeezed her hand. 6 months later, Sarah filed for divorce. It was messy and painful and expensive, but she emerged from it stronger than I had ever seen her. She and Ethan moved to a smaller house closer to Denver, closer to me, closer to the Gibsons. These days, Sunday dinner at Harold and Margaret's includes a few extra chairs. Sarah brings a salad. Ethan argues about basketball with Marcus. Michael is gone from our lives, a cautionary tale that none of us discuss. And I sit at that crowded table, looking at the family I chose and the family that finally chose me back, and I feel something I didn't know I had been missing all those years. Wholeness. Last Christmas Eve, 7 years after that lonely dinner at the rustic table, I stood in Harold and Margaret's living room with a glass of wine in my hand and watched 3 generations of family, blood and chosen, laughing together. Sarah caught my eye across the room and raised her glass. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah? Thanks for not giving up on me. Even when I gave you every reason to." I thought about everything that had happened. The rejection, the silence, the phone call asking for money, the accident that finally cracked her open, the slow, careful work of rebuilding something we had both nearly destroyed. "That's what fathers do," I said. "The good ones, anyway." And Margaret, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, smiled and said, "That's what family does. All of us." If you're watching this and you're struggling with family, whether it's the family you were born into or the family you're trying to build, I want you to know something. It's never too late. It's never too late to set a boundary. It's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to accept an invitation from a stranger who sees something in you worth saving. Family isn't about obligation or blood or shared history. Family is about choice. It's about showing up, day after day, not because you have to, but because you want to. It's about seeing someone's worth, even when they can't see it themselves. Harold Gibson saw that in me on a cold Christmas Eve when I was at my lowest. And because he chose to invite a stranger to his table, I found everything I didn't know I was looking for. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And remember, the best revenge isn't loud or angry. The best revenge is building a life so full of love that the people who rejected you finally see what they lost. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.